Alright, let's have a change of mood for a second. You might have seen videos on this anime already, some of which are really good and do a perfect job at giving a short analysis on everything within it, praising this work in the process. And now, I think it's finally time we throw our hats into the ring and give our opinions on it too. If you know me, you probably know that this anime is the whole reason behind my identity and my passion, and as such, I generally respect it as one of the most enjoyable, emotional, empathetic, humorous, and cathartic slice-of-life anime I've ever had the pleasure of watching.
It's a show that's very important to a lot of people, including us. A story so powerful that it changes the lives of the many people that watch it.
Yep, it's finally time that I am Manpig, in this final entry of the key retrospective series, covered Clannad, and its second season, the one you're here for, Clannad After Story. And well, here we are. It's the holiday season, and what better way to wrap up this retrospective on a date that is as significant as Christmas Eve? Well, rather, it's significant in two ways, but that will get elaborated on later. Anyways, welcome one final time to the Anime Manga Marathon of 2021, and welcome to the third and final entry in this key seasonal retrospective series. Hi, my name is Leeson, I'm almost 20 years old, I'm still pretty damn nerdy, and I still, very much so, freaking love Clannad. And other stuff too, of course.
And a hello from the Manpig too. I am 20 years old, however, I still have the beating heart of a 7-year-old, and as a die-hard Key fan, I too love Clannad.
Alrighty, to give a rundown of how we got here, we've covered Air, which was pretty much the second work of Key from the year 2000, and the first adaptation by KyoAni in 2005, which we both felt was a treasured work and one of a kind with its story, and kicked off KyoAni's true legacy of emotional anime material and adaptations. Part 1 will be linked in the description and on the iCard. And secondly, we covered the predecessor work, Kanon, originally from 1999, which got the KyoAni treatment in 2006 to a much more accepting audience in comparison to that of Air's adaptation. We specifically noted how we've personally felt the work was important to us and to classic and modern day Key fans and what its core message truly means. Part 2 will also be linked in the description and on the iCard. And now to conclude our trilogy, it would only make sense to talk once again about Clannad on this channel, considering it's the third, final, and longest entry of the Key seasonal works. I've actually talked a tiny bit about Clannad's series before, in April 2020 in fact, with the video that I made discussing my experience with the Clannad movie by Toei. And all I gotta say on that front is, whether or not you've seen the anime series or read the visual novel, in any case, just don't bother with the movie. It focuses on its own distinct plot that's very loosely tied with the plot of the visual novel, severely downgrades all of its characters to nothing more than just roadblocks and cameos, and gives zero development to anything, it seems, while being all non-cohesive with its plotline. Needless to say, it's a load of toss. KyoAni winning, that's all I'll say.
Yeah, Toei can occasionally win, but this ain't it, Chief.
Train scene! But finally, after more than a year and a half on this special day in December 2021, I finally get to talk about the series I've wanted to today. And here it is, Clannad. Initially released on April 28, 2004 as a special limited release to Japan. Near enough 3.5 year difference between Air's release in September 2000. So what was happening between this time and what led up to Clannad's production and eventual release?
Essentially, after Air came out, the main criticism that Maeda received was the ending. I won't go into too much detail with it, but essentially, it wasn't to everyone's taste. I assume the reason was partially because Galgame audiences usually go into a game to enjoy themselves and to have a good time. Whilst Kanon was known for being emotional, it never dared to have an ending that wasn't happy in the end. In comparison, Air's main ending isn't the same sunshine and rainbows that Kanon's were, and is also very vague. So to some people, that could have been somewhat unsatisfying. As a result of this, Maeda felt like he needed to make a new work for the company that would satisfy the audience that Galgame visual novels would usually pander to, while also making it appealing enough for newer audiences to consume. Maeda always has a mentality of wanting to make his works bigger and better each time. What Maeda wanted to make next was a story that made you feel a deep connection with humanity, the individual people that make it up, as well as a town that these people resided in. Compared to Air, which had an obvious focus on the main heroine, he made individual heroines and their stories able to take more of a spotlight instead. With this, he started working on a story along with Suzumoto Yuichi, Fuji Tomotaka, Okano Toya, and Kai that would further exceed his ability, with a massive vision for the story and world. As a result, Clannad's length became twice as long as initially expected, and Suzumoto Yuichi surmised that this was because the core concept of the story made its character roots larger as well. Eventually, it became the biggest keywork on initial release, with the only bigger keywork being Little Busters when including its EX roots, which were added on later. Maeda wanted to release the game in 2002, but it was postponed before eventually releasing in April of 2004 in limited release, with a regular release coming out on August 6th that same year. Whilst they were also working on a smaller release in the form of Planetarian, Clannad was the main big game that Key was hyping up for the era.
And that was the visual novel and its production for you. So with that, I now want to discuss the anime adaptation. Once again by KyoAni, the date is October 5th, 2007, and Tatsuya Ishihara comes back to direct once again for yet another KyoAni Key anime. This time for Clannad. Clannad will consist of 23 episodes and one OVA, totaling to 24 episodes. The OVAs for Clannad are ones that focus on different routes or scenarios that aren't the main storyline, so their relevance to the main story is not that significant in terms of the anime, but is interesting for those who want to see an alternative scenario. The main storyline in the case for the Clannad anime is one that mostly focuses on Nagisa Furukawa, but the different scenario for this OVA is one involving Tomoyo Sakagami, both characters we will get into shortly. But you may be puzzled. We just said that Clannad is the second longest keywork of all time, but it seems no longer than canon by anime standards. I'm assuming the vast minority have thought that because if you don't know what Clannad is, you would not know about its second season, Clannad After Story. Remember the true roots from Air? They come back here, and After Story is the one and only true root of Clannad. And with this, KyoAni decided to adapt this true root into its own anime, something which you will see with other key adaptations later on, such as Little Buster's Refrain by JC Staff, and Rewrite Moon and Terror by Studio 8-Bit. It's supposed to be played off in this sense as a continuation of the main story, because we now get to see the main character go from delinquency to becoming a responsible working adult. After Story consists of 24 episodes and one OVA, totaling to 25 episodes for After Story, and 49 overall. The second OVA is once again depicting another scenario with another heroine, this time focusing on the Fujibayashi twins, but mainly Kyo in this case. 49 episodes. Boy. I'm hoping for some good stuff here. Well, I wouldn't have a Kotomi AVI if it wasn't some good stuff, but I'll leave that for later. But anyways, that's enough messing around. Let's dive right into it. Alright, so what is Clannad's deal here? So to begin with, our main character here is Tomoya Okazaki, a third-year high school student who only has a mind filled with regret after past events and has nothing but spite for the town he lives in and the people he has come to know up until this point. Walking up the hill, he finds a girl in the same year standing underneath the cherry blossom trees. She randomly spouts Anpan and asks, "Do you like this school?" and talks about how much she loves it and how it holds memories that she cherishes a lot. But then she also states that things will change in the future, and asks us that even if it does change, can you still like this place? This girl is Nagisa Furukawa, someone who lacks confidence but is very delightful and passionate, which makes up for it. After attempting to talk with Nagisa some more, Tomoya then finds out that Nagisa is a repeater for the third year, and was sick right before the exams, hence the repeat. And also finds out that she is passionate about restarting the drama club in school after it was disbanded the year prior. So with Nagisa wanting to do drama and Tomoya having nothing really better to do with himself, they decide to do whatever it takes to restart the drama club and conduct a play at the school festival. Once again, like the previous keyworks, the premise for this plot is very straightforward. There are a few roadblocks I will get into much later when we cover the arcs of season 1, but before we do, I feel like we should discuss the characters within Clannad first and foremost. We have essentially covered Tomoya and Nagisa in a brief but concise manner, but what about the others? First one up is Yohei Tsunohara, a delinquent and slacker much like Tomoya, but is generally a lot more unrestrained and chaotic compared to Tomoya's more laid-back, not care in the world attitude, attempting such things as battling or meddling with Tomoyo every day. or getting beaten up by said Tomoyo, Kyo, or the rugby team in the boys' dorm. I consider Sunahara personally to be a comic relief sort of character, kind of how Kitagawa was supposed to be in canon. But the only difference there is that Sunahara is with us for as long as Tomoyo is with us, whereas Kitagawa didn't really have many scenes to show off his true traits and buddy status much, if at all. But the archetype is all the same. A bro character, comic relief, someone who brings light out of a dark and sad situation. Even with this trait though, Sunahara isn't exempt from being involved in situations and conversations he has to take seriously.
Sunahara is arguably the most important bro character in Ki since he's the first one to get any substantial screen time. Like Leeson said, Kitagawa essentially got nothing, and before Ki itself, Sumi from 1 had even less importance. Sunahara was a pretty big step in the sole fact that he is the first time the company had a major male character that wasn't the main character.
Next is Fuko Ibuki, an oddball character to me personally, but that quirkiness is her charm and definitely solidifies her appeal as an odd but lovable character. Her arc is the only one that really shows her true character to her full extent, and although she does appear again a many handful of times throughout the first season after her arc, these moments are hit or miss in my opinion, but again, more on that later. We next have Kotomi Ichinose. Kotomi is freaking adorable. I want to ruffle her hair, be a teddy bear, and give her cuddles. I want to talk to passers-by and share with everyone just how much I like Kotomi, because Kotomi is precious. Kotomi is wonderful.
I concur and fully agree. Thank you, Kotomi, for being one of my first favorite female characters, and also the reason I love purple-haired cuties voiced by Noto Mamiko.
Anyways, she's a well-known genius student at the school who spends most of her time in the library. A recluse. In her arc, she tries to make friends with some of Tomoyo's friends in order to boost her courage and get out more and socialize. Her social awkwardness and neurodivergent takes on everyone else's statements are really what make her a lovable and important character from the get-go. She is an honest gem out of our main group and my personal favorite. We now have Kyo Fujibayashi, who, unlike any of the female characters so far, is much more of an abrasive kind of character, and some people might like that sort of thing from a character like Kyo, and it's what makes a character interesting in the cast. And she also has a sister in Tomoyo's class called Ryo. I guess all I can really say about Ryo is that she tends to rely on her sister a lot, but she is a good character all things considered, and she deserves a lot more love honestly. And this ends with Tomoyo Sakagami, another character that I can appreciate a lot more on my latest watched around. She is a responsible character despite being younger than the majority of the main cast. She is helpful, she has a gold set, and she's genuinely a sweet character to boot. She is knowledgeable, smart, and sweet. Definitely grown to be a better character in my eyes.
Those are all of Clannad's main characters. Now, since Yo technically isn't a heroine, that means Clannad has 5 heroines. A step up from Air's 3, but still not surpassing Kanon's number of 5 as well. I definitely think the heroine cast this time around is pretty good, however compared to Kanon, they don't really have much diversity in my opinion. We have Nagisa and Kotomi who both occupy a shy girl archetype, while Kyo and Tomoyo both have a more rough girl archetype. Although Tomoyo is a much more responsible character, they do have their similarities. Fuko is the exception in that she's a cute ball of moe. It's not a bad cast, and I do love these characters. I'm just saying, in terms of personalities and potential favorite tropes, Clannad doesn't offer much variety compared to other galgay out there.
I could discuss the other characters such as Nagisa's parents, Sunahara's sister Mei, Masai Sagara, Yukinei Mizawa, Tomoyo's dad Naoyuki, etc. But I'll talk more about those characters in the necessary arcs, 4 of which are important mostly for after story, so I'll cover those in detail later on, but this section of the review, I'll only cover Nagisa's parents and maybe a little bit Tomoyo's dad too.
If it isn't obvious already, Clannad has the biggest cast of characters by far compared to the company's previous outings. This is a result of the theme of people as well as the town they live in, as a town wouldn't just have a couple of characters living in it, would it? Clannad is also interesting in that it doesn't just have main heroines, but also side heroines and side roots that have nothing to do with Tomoya's romance life. What makes Clannad more unique than your average visual novel is this aspect, as it means the story expands in various ways that galgay visual novels usually don't. This is not just a B-shoujo game, it's a full-on story with a living, breathing town that Tomoya is simply a part of. This also plays into the true root, after story, which in my opinion is what really sets Clannad apart from other key works. but we'll talk about that later.
Alright, and so tackling the premise and characters featured leads us into presentation, and to be honest, what is there to say? Once again, animation and production has improved from last time in Kanon, and here is where I believe the art and visual style KyoAni has provided this time around had peaked when it came to adapting the original source material, being Hinoe's original art style from the visual novel. It does change up quite a bit again once After Story comes around, making expressions a lot more dynamic and animation in general once again being refined to the best version it can possibly be. But even still, Season 1's art style is nothing to be concerned about. Once again, I feel as though the eyes have good placement, and they aren't too big whatsoever. Quit your damn complaining. It's really not as bad as you think, and dare I say, it's beautiful. Seriously though, it could be infinitely worse. I feel as though they are more square than round in Season 1, which is what I feel is the defining feature of Hinoe's adapted style, but even still, I find no issues with this at all.
Clannad is definitely where KyoAni peaked in terms of adapting the key art style, especially for Season 2, where I'd actually argue it looks closer to other Kyoto animation shows than the original visual novel art style, which isn't bad. It just goes to show how well they kept the spirit of Hinoe Itaru's art style while refining it for animation. Clannad is the first visual novel where I feel Hinoe began cleaning up her art style to be a lot less rough, if that makes sense. Obviously, the initial release was still a bit pixely due to the resolution, but you can really feel the colors and edges have a much smoother, uniform look compared to the more extreme looking Kanon or Air, for better and for worse. I will say that while Clannad's visual novel does look smoother and nicer, it does lose a distinctness of atmosphere that earlier works had. Not that it's any slight against the art style itself, it's purely the atmosphere. Although, I have to admit that even I was a bit put off by the anime's designs at first. But seriously, it's not that hard to get used to. Don't give people a hard time just for their art style quality, have some class.
And next we have, you guessed it, the OST. I may be biased when I say this, but I definitely feel as though here, compared to the other OSTs of Kanon and Air, that the tracks here showcase, present, and boast much more of a nostalgic and heartwarming factor. It must be because I'm a lot more familiar with these compositions when comparing them to Kanon or Air. Saying this though, once again, this is not to discredit Kanon or Air's OSTs, since like I had said, I really enjoyed those as well, and you could tell the effort and the inspiration was there with those soundtracks as well. Of course, Maeda knows his stories, so he knows how the soundtrack should fit. To pick out tracks in specific that I love from Clannad's OST, they would include Fantasy, Magmel, Town Flow of Time People, Nagisa, Kotomi's theme, Hurry Starfish, which is Fuko's theme, Spring Breeze, The Day's Leisure, Existence, and Roaring Tides. And really, that's just to name a few, because that's not even half of what I love from this OST. Also, the OP for Season 1 in the anime seems to be a remix of Magmal, the ending being a composition of a vocalized Nagisa theme in Dango Daikazoku. For After Story, the OP is Toki wo Kizamu Uta, and the ending is Torch. Both I think are original tracks made for the anime, with Leah vocalizing both, and once again, she's great here. And the tracks themselves are, just like I had said for the rest of the OST, nostalgic, heartwarming, and beautiful in their own right.
I generally agree with those opinions, although I feel like Clannad's OST ranks more in the middle. See, I feel like Clannad is a case where it feels like it has a few really outstanding tracks, but most of them generally feel very similar in tone. I think out of all the existing key OSTs we've covered, Clannad's OST is the most consistent for better and for worse, with a lot of great piano tracks that are both cute and emotional when need be. Most tracks in Clannad fall into these categories, slow and contemplative, or cute and charming. That's basically it. There are a few exceptions here and there, but in my opinion, this is overall what holds it back from being top tier. That being said, it definitely leans into a very ephemeral feel that fits the story of Clannad a lot. Lee Sin pretty much named all of my favorite tracks, so I don't have much more to comment on.
With that, I think it's as good a time as any to start discussing these arcs of Clannad, beginning with the introductory arc, episodes 1 to 4. Just like the introductory arcs of Kanon and Air, these are really only here to serve as world building, engaging in mutual conversations and dialogue with characters, and not much else. You get highlighted the connections of the different characters, such as the one establishing between Tomoyo and Nagisa, and also the rest of the characters to Tomoyo, who at this point has just moved to Hikarizaka High School, and already rooted relationships between Tomoyo and Sunahara, Tomoyo and Kyo, etc. I still feel as though the common route presented as the introductory arc in the anime is a nice inclusion to have here though, and makes sense for a series of this type because world building is majorly important for any series. Not just for a visual novel, but even for anime originals of this size and scope.
The common route, or introductory arc, is definitely a talking point when it comes to Clannad. See, Clannad is known for having the longest route of every key work, period. However, the key difference is Clannad's common route isn't dumped all at once like most are. Instead, there are different variants of the common route that correspond to different characters or heroines, which means there's going to be a lot of heroine exclusive scenes in the common route, and that adds up hard. This is for better or for worse depending on who you ask. As while someone like me think it's better since you get to know more of the characters and so you also don't have to cram all of the boring stuff into one giant session, others don't like it as much cause, well, it's very repetitive and tedious. So what does that mean for the anime? Well, the anime actually does something that most people don't usually like with their anime adaptations. It cuts out things. Now, people usually hate this, but basically what the anime cuts out are a lot of the individual moments that in hindsight don't matter that much for the story. It's a case of trimming excess fat to some. While these scenes do add to certain characters, sometimes even a lot, as well as having their own great moments, Clannad anime just forgoes it all in order to streamline the story as much as possible. And even when it does that, it still manages to take 4 episodes of pure introduction and character hijinks. However, I will say, for first consumption, this is a good call as far as I'm concerned, as all it does is help watchers know the characters and possibly get acquainted to them, which is all a common route would really need to do. I know for a fact, a lot of people I've talked to actually get put off from Clannad when they read the visual novel first because of this very reason.
This arc then perfectly segues into the next, which is Fuko's arc, episodes 5 to 9. If I'm being honest with you, this may be the point where most turn off of the series, and I don't blame them personally since the arc's pacing in and of itself is very slow. Still though, being that I've watched this all before, I can press on with no issues and still enjoy Fuko's arc regardless. Rewatching this arc has really revitalized Fuko's character for me and made me care about her a whole lot more than I usually had. To begin with, there was a rumor going around the school that there was a ghost of a girl that gives you an object if you approach her, which was weird to hear from Tomoyo's perspective, but he carries on his day as usual. This was until he meets Fuko in a classroom, carving a star shape out of wood and noticing that she cuts herself accidentally with a blunt blade. She then appears later trying to find her knife to continue carving her stars, with Tomoyo pulling some more pranks on her in the process. Tomoyo has his suspicions about Fuko, but it wouldn't be until Tomoyo tries to ask Fuko if she's interested in joining the drama club that Nagisa relays some information that she's heard about Fuko being in a hospital, and that she's said to be the ghost girl like mentioned before. So essentially this arc revolves around her carving out starfish to give to random people, and this starfish is meant to be an invitation to her sister's wedding, like she said when giving one out to Tomoyo. Her sister happens to be Koko Ibuki, who Nagisa happens to know, and she used to be an art teacher at the school before leaving, and she has been wanting to marry her fiancé, Yusuke Yoshino, who happens to be a former musician. In the meantime, Tomoyo and Nagisa try to help out Fuko however they can, making her try to fit in with all of their friends and trying to help out with carving more starfish to give out to people. We get to the opening festival at episode 6, where Fuko is trying her best to give out starfish to people. It's this episode where Koko comes to the festival at Tomoyo and Nagisa's request, to then find out that Fuko cannot be seen by Koko at school. My voice won't reach her. The Fuko at school is merely a vision to people who don't necessarily know the truth about her condition, but the real Fuko is in a coma at the hospital and has been since entry. But despite that, the vision is seen by everyone but her sister, and everyone has been handed starfish and accepted them from her. But little by little, as we go on throughout this arc, it becomes noticeable that every student is seeming to forget about Fuko's existence, and does not even know that she is there, and this is something that Tsunohara picks up once he had observed it. This gets to the point where the main characters are starting to forget about Fuko. They forgot. And by the time episode 9 rolls around, Tomoyo and Nagisa also seem to forget about Fuko, but it was not until they see Kimura, a teacher at school, setting up a sign for a wedding venue. They are told by Kimura that they were actually the ones that set up the wedding venue in the first place, which then makes them both remember why they did it. Because of Fuko. Fuko reappears for the wedding to appear in front of Coco, telling her to be happy and to not grieve because of her current condition. Her sister would rather want her to be happy with the person she loves. This is our first hint at our integral message for Clannad as a whole. Unspecified yet, but makes a lot more sense as time goes on. It's also important to mention here, technically speaking throughout all of this, Fuko in a way of speaking is technically the catalyst for everything to follow. The gathering of all the drama club members eventually. The first to bring us the integral message of Clannad as a whole, and most importantly, forming Tomoyo and Nagisa's relationship with each other from the get-go, and giving them a mutual bond. If you put time into it and pay attention to Fuko's arc, you could come out and see why Clannad would be special to people and see a new light. Something I even learned coming out of it for the 4th time, because ever since, I've seen Fuko in a much different sort of light than from previous watches.
Fuko's arc is a generally pretty good arc that when I finished for the first time helped me understand immediately why Clannad had gained the reputation it received. Since consuming more of Ki, it's not one I particularly value over most other character routes, but it still left a strong impression on me when I first saw it in the anime, and that power still holds up today. The insert song. That hits no matter how many times I see this route. I think the anime making Fuko's route the first one to adapt was very smart. As Lee Sin said, her spreading the stars was a good way of further introducing various characters that would later be brought together. One thing I love about the anime is that while the original Fuko route was romance focused, the anime instead took the liberty to make Fuko's arc bring Nagisa and Tomoyo closer together, as a result of Nagisa being the true heroine. In fact, as you'll soon notice, Nagisa plays a much larger role in all arcs compared to the visual novel throughout this anime, which is mostly anime original. It's very smart, and in my opinion, makes this story work far better in the anime format.
After Fuko's arc is Kotomi's arc, episodes 10 to 14, and it's one of my personal favorites. Not because Kotomi is one of my favorite characters, but more so in the sense of relevance to the actual story, but more on that shortly. Kotomi's arc starts out because of Tomoyo telling Tsunohara about her, in which, knowing Tsunohara, of course he tries to make moves on her with no success. However, this does get Tomoyo thinking that she does tend to spend a lot of time by herself in the library, so he insists on her making friends with her social awkwardness and all. It's more or less this for the first 2 episodes, having her acquire a violin, a dangerous weapon in her hands.
Hey yo, look who fell asleep first. Prank him, John. You already know.
Playing a small concert held by Kyo and the others, and having her try and make friends with Nagisa, Kyo, and Ryo, all in an attempt to get her to come out of her shell, which she eventually does by episode 12. By episode 12 though, even if she is confident to break out of her shell, disaster strikes when Nagisa is told that one of the school buses had had an accident, which gets Kyo all worried about her sister Ryo, who does take the bus, but thankfully she took a later bus. The accident is something that sparks Kotomi's traumatic past as she starts to cry uncontrollably, leading her to shelter herself away in her own house. We later find out that the reason she cuts pages out of books is because she finds her parents' names in them. And also, since she's an exceptional student, she wants to study in America, but it is unknown what that is for at that point. In this episode and the next, we find out what business the bad man that Kotomi refers to really has with her. He was a colleague of Kotomi's parents, who we then find out died in a plane crash. Kotomi's guilt for saying that she hated her parents, added with the trauma of their loss, was what really drove her to try and be an exceptional at academics, and later pursue in her parents' field of study. This field of study is something that is important to the plot, as it details an existence of another world out there somewhere, which is what links to the scenes featuring a girl and robot in the field of nothing. Scenes that are shown in between the main plot as a sort of side plot that tries to link everything together. together. Somehow those two worlds are linked with each other, and Kotomi's parents, their colleague, and the organization they are a part of know about its existence, just not its purpose. Which also correlates to the existence of the light orbs that appear now and then for Tomoyo. This is an astronomically huge plot point because until now, these girl and robot scenes in the other world were random, but now they've been given a purpose. To tie everything together. Problem is, at this moment in time with the story, we don't exactly know how, but it will get elaborated on much later.
This isn't the first time Key has made some fantastical world aside from the main existing one. And it actually won't even be the last either. I wonder if all of these fantastical worlds are related in any way.
To make Kotomi come out of hiding, Tomoyo decides after finding out those two were childhood friends and everything else considered, to work on her garden and do whatever he can to help, with the others pitching in near the end as well. I think these gestures alone are what show Tomoyo's true kind-hearted nature, and not that he's just a delinquent like he always says. He has a heart for people and wants to do whatever it takes to make others happy. And eventually his hard work does pay off, with Kotomi entering the garden, showing that she's all okay. This was an exceptional arc for me because it really dives deep into the character drive and the emotional factor. It's brilliant.
Now if Lee Sin's glowing review wasn't enough for you, I'll add even more onto it. Kotomi's arc is the one that made me truly fall in love with Clannad. It wasn't after story, it began here. Kotomi's route is a heavy favorite of mine even now that I finished every key work. Her character was so charming, and her route in the visual novel in my opinion is one of the best too. Because her route is the only route that has a true group dynamic with the whole cast. This is one of the only routes where a full drama club is built, and it's all because of Kotomi and Tomoyo's desire to help her make friends. This also led to some great development on Tomoyo's part, and soon, the eventual message of this route. Basically, the reason the colleague wanted to talk to Kotomi was because he had a suitcase that contained a teddy bear, as well as a letter addressed to Kotomi. It was found from the wreckage of her parents' flight, and was passed across the world until it made its way to her. A final gift from her parents, with a letter that told her that she could take life one step at a time, that she could find her footing even if she was sad. It's a beautiful message that had me in tears when I first consumed it. Yeah, this was it. This was my first experience with Key's best.
Next up is something I like to call the Harem arc, episodes 15 to 18. What I mean by Harem arc is that it tries to adapt a small part of 3 separate character arcs into one. The arcs in question being Tomoyo, Kyo, and Ryo. However, in this case in particular, it tries to go for a more anime original approach rather than fully adapting these parts of the visual novel instead of making it a strict chimera of all 3 arcs. And I gotta be honest, it's one of my least favorite arcs of season 1, but it's still fairly good in some regards as we have a lot more stuff to like about Tomoyo and a fair conclusion in the end. The arc starts off with having enough members and a teacher in mind to supervise the drama club, so things are looking up for Nagisa. But it turns out that the choir club already have Kimura as their supervisor, and some members of the choir club aren't going to be as easy to convince to let go of Kimura. This all leads to Sunahara setting up a basketball tournament to decide which club gets to have Kimura as a supervisor. The be-all, end-all deciding factor. Tomoyo, Sunahara, and Kyo were facing off against both classes of the basketball team. Due to Tomoyo's past with basketball, the leader knew exactly how to throw the gang off. All in all, it was a close match, but Tomoyo's team came out on top with encouragement from Nagisa. This moment is nice too because Tomoyo was doubting why he was even doing all of this in the first place, but Nagisa's encouragement was what made him win for them. A good example of Tomoyo's and Nagisa's relationship strengthening each other. The choir club and drama club thought about the possibility of having Kimura advise both clubs, but due to the school council's set rules, that thought was crushed, and so the drama club was postponed once again, also due to Nagisa falling ill. These next 2 episodes were odd ones for me. While I do enjoy that the characters do get their spotlight, Kyo in episode 17 and Tomoyo in episode 18, I honestly wasn't a fan of Kyo's approach to the situation. She was hinting at liking Tomoyo from earlier on in the season, but because of her tendency to put her sister before herself, It created an awkward love triangle between her, Ryo, and Tomoyo, when neither of them had any real mutual connections with each other besides from hanging out now and then. Kyo just came off as pushy and forceful here, not allowing Tomoyo any privacy or peace to himself, heavily insistent. I feel that this is what dragged down Kyo's character for me, not that she's bad in any sense, but it's just how she came across in this arc which didn't really sit right with me. And I also feel like Ryo was sort of being dragged into it as well. Ryo and Tomoyo, I don't really feel have much chemistry because of that lack of mutual connection.
I feel though as if that was the point, considering how their relationships go in the visual novel, which I'll get to later.
Tomoyo, on the other hand, was the major one in the spotlight in this arc. This arc really does highlight her responsibilities as a character, her motivation, and her reasoning for how she is now. In comparison to someone like Kyo, her backstory involving her brother illustrated her development as to where she is now as a person, and no longer picking fights because of her own issues. Tomoyo is just such more of a developed character and a sweeter and much more reasonable one to boot. And I couldn't forget this line she said to Tomoyo that being a family is not just being those related by blood, because it can also extend to your friends. I am really glad that a rewatch has made me think more fondly of her than ever before. The tennis scene in episode 18 is regarded as a funny scene to some?
Wait, people think that scene's supposed to be funny? How?
I don't think it's anything like that in the slightest. Paying attention to everything that has gone on in the season thus far, it makes a lot of sense why Kyo and Ryo would cry profusely, and why Tomoyo instinctively stopped the other tennis player from helping Nagisa after getting hit. It was to signify that those two are a lot more mutually connected than the others had thought, and the fact that Tomoyo has Nagisa on his mind the whole time is an obvious hint that, yeah, they are bound to get together at some point. Tomoyo is sensible, hence why she wasn't as bothered. In fact, she was happy that they're a thing. And I'm glad Kotomi never really had any feelings in the anime, mainly because I feel as though Kotomi should just be left as a childhood friend in the story. Not that I'm against a romance route, like in the visual novel. It just makes sense for this adaptation personally. In Kyo's eyes, she just saw every other girl as competition, hence the forcefulness, but again, wasn't a fan of that. Despite that though, I feel as though this was definitely a good scene and a good way to wrap up the Harem arc.
Clannad's Harem arc is pretty much the result of KyoAni going essentially anime original to skip over the Kyo and Tomoyo routes, as well as adapt further common route slice of life elements without, actually progressing into a proper romance. In fact, this arc is probably the reason Tomoyo is called the Harem Master in Kakinado, since unlike other key anime, it's basically confirmed that other characters are pining for his affection, instead of it being just implied or brushed under the rug. I think it's inoffensive, and does its job of giving screen time to other heroines whose roots can't be adapted properly into a linear anime.
I also neglected to talk about Fuko's appearances after her arc and Kotomi's arc in this arc. But yes, she reappears now and then as just a funny gag, and that's really it, to be honest. I don't know how to personally feel about these scenes. Obviously, it's nice to see a lot more Fuko, and again, I don't dislike him by any means. But I'm more confused as to why they made her return as some gag character now and then after her arc in season 1, when she wasn't originally there in the visual novel. Feels out of place personally. What did you think of these scenes, Manpig?
I mean, I personally didn't mind them. Yeah, they kind of come out of nowhere cause they're an anime original add-on, but it's a nice way of keeping Fuko in the cast somewhat despite what happened in her route. Spoiler warning for Kanon in 3, 2, 1. Although, if they went the Makoto route and had her missing from the rest of the story until a certain point, that would have also been great because Makoto pain doesn't ever go away. Spoiler section over.
But now, the final arc for season 1 is upon us. The Nagisa arc, which consists of episodes 19 to 22, with 23 being an extra episode added onto the story. We will talk about the Tomoyo OVA in the overall thoughts section. But essentially, after the events that transpired in the last arc, Tomoyo is now the student council president and she has cleared her name with everyone. And because of this, the drama club can now finally be open again, with Kimura looking over both drama and choir clubs. After some situations and misunderstandings concerning Tomoyo and his dad, Nagisa is fed up with Tomoyo's avoidance and takes him to see his dad with his teacher. Nagisa eventually regrets it after witnessing Tomoyo's dad's nonchalant behavior with his teacher, teacher, and allows Tomoyo to live with her and her parents for a while until things work out between Tomoyo and his dad. Her parents, Sanai and Akio, are genuinely happy to have him around, but it's this happiness and this joyousness that Tomoyo is not used to, making him question if he will ever be able to adjust. And it does also get Nagisa a little bit bummed out, as we find out later in our arc. But she convinces herself that nothing is wrong and focuses on the play for the upcoming school festival. She takes references from other plays and combines that with her own knowledge of the play that she wants to do, and it's at this point that Tomoyo becomes happy because of what he has become, all thanks to Nagisa. It is that relationship I talked about earlier. Tomoyo regrets his past events but puts it aside to spend time with Nagisa and feels happier now that he does. And Nagisa used to lack confidence, and that is what Tomoyo tries to give her. This is the most organic relationship in the entire anime, and it really shows how natural they bounce off of one another. With the play coming to fruition and the school festival around the corner, everyone prepares for the play by doing a small rehearsal the day before. After learning from Akio about Nagisa's past and the reason why she has a fever every year, Tomoyo is obviously concerned for Nagisa's own well-being, but still encourages her. Nagisa still has the feeling that her parents are hiding something from her, but she doesn't exactly know what. It is the night before the play, and Nagisa goes into the shed to find a flashlight for the play for tomorrow. She finds it, but accidentally knocks over some boxes. When looking in the boxes, she finds out that they are filled with memories, all from the Furukawa's past. She finds the photo albums of Akio's past, where he used to be an actor, and Sanai used to be a teacher, and becomes depressed because she feels responsible for Akio's and Sanai's dreams getting crushed. This leads on to episode 22, the day the play is held. Nagisa is still depressed, but decides to be with Tomoyo for the majority of the school festival until she takes a detour to Yukine's archive room and finds her dad's plays, which then makes her even more depressed and unwilling to gain any more motivation. There is a problem that I do have with this conundrum. I feel like if and when she found out, and Akio did realize that she did find out after she had the photo albums on the table, this conundrum could have been resolved a lot earlier with Akio talking to Nagisa and trying to resolve things. But then, there would be no drama element. It's a small issue, and just something I thought I'd point out. Nonetheless, the play is now set to start. Nagisa is up on stage, and because of her dad's passion for acting, she becomes motionless on stage, almost as if she has stage fright, and then suddenly begins to cry, as she can't help but feel guilty. But Akio comes through and gives out a speech to Nagisa, egging her on, and saying that she didn't halt his or Sanai's dream. Rather, that she is their dream, and doesn't want that dream to die out or be lost. They are waiting for this moment, and the time has come. A heartfelt speech from family. There is a consistent theme with family in Clannad, and that is the message it tries to reflect. Family is important to people. To reinforce Tomoyo's earlier statement a few episodes prior, Sanai begins to egg her on as well as Tomoyo himself. It's this encouragement which gets her to put on the play. If I'm being honest here, and this might come as a controversial opinion, I sort of also like the play scene from the movie. Maybe not as much as this scene in retrospect, but a fair bit, I'll admit, because it was also probably the best thing about the movie. The previous encouragement here though from Akio may be a bit late, but was really empathetic. I mean, in terms of an actual scene we get to see of the play, and in terms of direction, I really like the movie's interpretation, despite of all of what that mess was trying to do before then. And that's really surprising considering I don't like much else about the movie at all. It's still a good play scene in the anime though, make no mistake, and it ties really well to the Golem Robot story as well. After the play, Nagisa decides to stay with Tomoyo. The whole gang celebrate their efforts, and later, Nagisa and Tomoyo go to the drama club by themselves. And now Tomoyo finds the perfect opportunity to ask Nagisa out. A perfect ending to any romance anime if I ever saw it, and makes sense for both of them. Their mutual attraction, how they bounce off of one another, everything is perfect for both of them to be together. The extra episode, episode 23, is just the aftermath of that situation given form, as Nagisa is made to be the one who takes initiative in the relationship thanks to Sunohara's sister Mei. And because Tomoyo and Nagisa don't exactly know how to take their relationship, they're given a little extra help until they decide to do it how they want to. Once again, showcasing that Tomoyo and Nagisa are the perfect match for one another and can trust each other a lot.
The main difference with Nagisa's final arc compared to the visual novel is one key thing: Tomoyo's relationship with Nagisa, as well as Nagisa's character. In the visual novel, they actually begin going out in the middle of the story, not the end, and the reason for this is simple. In the anime, Nagisa is presented as a lot more of a kind, helpful character with a shy side to her who's always there throughout the entire story. However, in her route, where you instead get a lot of one-on-one time instead, Tomoyo quickly realizes Nagisa is actually a very insecure person who's really, and I mean really, struggling to motivate herself to keep going. The reason she said the things about the town and moving on in the beginning of the series wasn't just there. It was her motivating herself. Tomoyo just happened to overhear her and encourage her. The reason Nagisa fell for Tomoyo was because of that, and the two end up supporting each other throughout the route while developing an intimate relationship. This is why stuff like Akio and Sanae's dreams being sidelined for her affects Nagisa a lot. It's because she really has a lot of trouble coming to terms with her own life and self-worth. In the anime, most of this is cut out and hardly brought to attention, which is a shame. But for the rest of it, I actually think this arc does a spectacular job with Nagisa and Tomoyo's relationship. While we don't delve deeper into Nagisa's character, their relationship building is far more convincing in the anime in my opinion, while leading to a far more impactful conclusion and confession at the ending of Season 1. Spectacularly done in my opinion, and one of the best love confessions in all of anime.
And with that, we covered Clannad Season 1, but okay, let's cover some differences like usual.
Okay, compared to previous entries, this one's gonna take a lot of time, cause contrary to what most people may think, there are a lot of differences that the anime has from the visual novel, in that the anime cuts about, I don't know, a third of the full story. Now, this isn't a slight against the anime, in fact, it's quite the opposite. But I'll get to that later on. Okay, so first, minor differences out of the way first. I've mentioned that the anime cuts out a lot of the common route for better and for worse. It shrinks out on character interactions so we know their personalities properly, but less of their inner workings and struggles, especially when it comes to Nagisa. However, it provides what's needed and honestly wastes a lot less, which is totally respectable. The Kyo and Tomoyo routes were unadaptable since they were entirely romance focused, and can't be done in a linear story, so we got aspects of them thrown into an anime original harem route instead, and having each of them get adapted into OVAs, which we'll talk about later. And to get to the biggest difference, the cut routes. Clannad's anime completely cut out two routes, those being the Kappei route and Komura route. While Komura does appear in the anime, his story is entirely absent from the anime adaptation of Clannad. As for Kappei, he is fully cut with basically no trace of their original existence. I'll go over Kappei's first. Kappei's route is essentially a story where you meet a boy named Kappei Hiragi. He appears as sort of a wanderer that Tomoyo meets and befriends. He takes a lot of job interviews in the city but constantly fails to get them due to weird quirks that he has. The reason he's staying here is because he wants to repay a girl that helped him when he first arrived in the city, who left him with nothing but her handkerchief. Surprise, surprise, it turns out that girl is Ryo, as in Kyo's little sister. And once they meet again, they hit it off. Immediately. Like, literally right after their first proper conversation. Even Tomoyo and Kyo were surprised. Okay, I'm gonna have to be real when I say this, but that wasn't nearly enough to sell me on a relationship, and I think it's extremely rushed, but okay then. Moving on comes the secrets that Kappei's been hiding. It turns out, Kappei used to be a pretty famous runner, but was one day diagnosed with cancer located in his leg bone. His disease was meant to be fatal unless his leg was amputated, but Kappei refused it as running was his only purpose for living. This of course makes Ryo utterly distraught as she seeks comfort from Tomoyo and Yusuke, who then encourage Ryo to convince Kappei to live on for Ryo's sake. Ryo also manages to find a newly discovered form of treatment that would let him keep his legs. And so, for the sake of Ryo as well as the friends that he's made, Kappei undergoes this new operation. The route ends 5 years later, with Kappei and Ryo happily married. This was okay. I mean, I didn't dislike it, and Kappei is a fine character, but as you can see, this really wasn't important, nor even executed in the best way. I feel like Tomoyo and Kappei got enough scenes together, if just to sell their relationship. But the thing is, Tomoyo comparatively takes a back seat in this story. The more major character other than Kappei is Ryo, who barely got any screen time or even meaningful interaction with Kappei, who is supposed to be her love interest. I'm sorry, I can't be sold on a romance when it progresses so quickly. It just feels unnatural. Ryo getting more independence to save the person she loved through this route was good, but the issue is that I wasn't sold on that love to begin with. Like, I get what they were going for, but I feel having one half of it being built up to character introduction and delegating everything else to the second half was not a good idea. The concept was great, but it was just rushed to the point it felt kind of pointless. And then we get to the Komura route, which is essentially the Nagisa route if you lose the basketball game. Once that happens, the drama club gets disbanded, and that's it. How is it a Komura route? Good question. Okay, jokes aside, there are scenes linked to Komura in there. The main idea is that they were looking for Komura to supervise their club, right? Well, it's in this route that we sort of learn more about him. He used to be a very strict teacher known for correcting delinquents, but as he got older, of course, he became a lot more gentle. In this new school, he thought he never needed to correct any students. However, of course, he eventually learns of the two delinquents, Tomoyo and Tsunohara. Komura is sort of who takes them under his wing, using his prior experience and cares for them while in the school. He's who brought the two together and made them friends, and he watches over them during their time. Tomoyo figures out that Komura is the reason he's been able to live a normal life despite his reputation, because Komura is just one of those teachers that oversees all of the students before he lets them go, constantly nurturing the next generation. After this, and hearing that he's going to retire soon, Tomoyo thanks Komura for his efforts, as well as for how much he's helped him. It's a very sweet message and scene. Emphasis on the latter cause all of this takes place in 15 minutes. I like the concept of Komura's story and how he nurtured Tomoyo and Tsunohara, but this sort of felt incomplete, or being real with you, kind of an afterthought. It's basically Nagisa's route until this one scene. Shouldn't we have had a proper common route segment that had Komura segments instead? Shouldn't we see how Komura helped the two delinquents instead of just the fact being told to us? I don't know. Like Kappei's route, I like the concept of this route, but it ended up feeling just like an afterthought. And ultimately I gotta ask, why was this here if there was so little focus put onto it? Komura's character isn't bad. In fact, in Clannad's side stories, we really get to see him shine. But other than that, I think you can understand why these two routes were cut out from the anime entirely. Not only would they have taken up considerable episode count, but they felt half-baked, incomplete. Ideas that were good in concept, but not given the proper time and focus they needed to be truly something special. It's a shame, but at least they're not bad per se, just inconsequential. So in hindsight, maybe it was a better idea if anything to cut them out. They're generally unnecessary for a grander story and just take up time. Some people say there's nothing wrong with more content, but I disagree with that. Taking up time means taking up motivation and interest to consume stories. Even if they add something new, they have to be worth that time investment. What the Clannad anime does is cut out all of the stuff that most people generally regard as inconsequential, such as those routes, as well as the overwhelmingly long stretches of extra slice of life. This kind of cutting can be a good thing. However, for the main heroine routes, since they were too major, they were instead adapted into anime as OVAs. Kyo's OVA was technically part of After Story, so we'll cover that there. For now though, let's focus on Tomoyo's OVA and route. Tomoyo's route is essentially a slice of life up to the point Tomoyo and Tomoya go out. And in their relationship, they get caught while doing something intimate in a classroom. Seriously guys, kind of a stupid call. Tomoyo then takes the brunt for it by making it seem like he's Tomoyo. This makes his own reputation plummet. People around him begin reprimanding him for being close to Tomoyo and say that his reputation is a stain on hers, and that Tomoya's presence in her life will limit her from reaching the heights and futures that she would be able to take. Tomoya then takes this to heart and thus breaks off their relationship, much to Tomoyo's dismay. The year passes by, and after they graduate, they meet again and discuss how Tomoyo was able to succeed in her goal. Tomoyo is happy for her, but Tomoyo mentions that ultimately, she decides she doesn't care about the lives she could obtain, and would rather stay with Tomoyo. As a result, they resume their relationship, and the route ends. The OVA is essentially an adaptation of the last stretch after the intimacy, and a quick one at that.
I thought that Tomoyo's OVA was something neat to enjoy. It got you to really enjoy and respect Tomoyo's company, even more especially with the relationship and intimacy that her and Tomoyo shared momentarily. And the ending to that OVA was heart-wrenching all the same, but was beautiful and really has you loving both characters even more with the knowledge you gain after watching the rest of Clannad.
I'm less of a fan of the Tomoyo OVA or even Root, admittedly. Tomoyo herself is a great character and had some of the most entertaining slice of life scenes in the common route, but I don't know. I personally just never really related to the struggle of bringing down someone else's reputation or breaking off a relationship because of that, so I never really felt much for it. The OVA is basically a very short, somewhat watered down version of her route, so you can take it or leave it for the anime experience. It doesn't have any major impact on the main story and is tackled better in the visual novel anyways if you want to see that story. I should also use this chance to mention that Tomoyo actually managed to get her own sequel spin-off in the form of Tomoyo After It's a Wonderful Life. Although, as Tomoyo After is essentially a brand new story with its own new cast of characters, we're not going to cover that here. That thing has enough content to make up an entire full-length video on its own.
Right, so now I think that's everything, so now is as good a time as any to give our opinions. So what do I personally think about Clannad Season 1? Well, for starters, I just want to state that out of all the romance slice of life anime I've seen so far, Clannad Season 1 is definitely a candidate for one of the best slice of life experiences I have watched, even without after story taking into consideration. Hard to say that I resonated with the characters here in Season 1 though. I was sort of feeling Tomoyo's struggles though, and that much is for sure, and this is probably the most I ever resonated towards a character from a key work thus far. Was the message in the details strong? Absolutely. Family is probably one of the most important things you can ever have that is close to you, so hold it close to you, for as long as you possibly can. And that's not just your actual family, it's your friends too. Everyone that is special to you. Hold your Dango Daikazuku close. Did I enjoy it for the duration of the time? Yes, I definitely did. Again, there were a few hiccups and things I didn't like about the characters, but I doubt that is much of a problem to me. It doesn't make me feel as though it really drags down the quality of Clannad because it is still high the whole time. So the problems I had about some of the characterization, plot, or pacing weren't really an issue. I could see why some have major problems, but they definitely aren't problems to me. Do I like the characters? Yes, the characters here I love for the most part. Whether it be comedic relief from Akio Asunahara, saddening and beautiful moments from Kotomi, Nagisa, Tomoyo, or Fuko, or just downright relatable moments from Tomoya, I can honestly say, hand on heart, I love this cast. But yeah, to conclude my segment for Season 1, Clannad is probably one of the best slice of life experiences that I have had. Many people have already watched the anime, and so if you would like to get into key works, Clannad is also a really good entryway into the world of key. In comparison to maybe the visual novel, I feel as though the Clannad anime is arguably the better option for consuming, though you should totally give either version a try. Even with the issues that I did experience on this watch through Clannad Season 1, it was still a really good watch that I heavily enjoyed all throughout. I personally consider Clannad Season 1 my third favourite of all of Key's works as of right now. Above Kanon's 2006 anime but below Planetarian. Because of that reason, Clannad Season 1 for me personally receives an 8 in score. Once again, this feels like the supreme slice of life experience for me, and not many slice of life anime have actually topped the influence and the feelings that this anime delivers to me on each rewatch of it. Unless a rewatch of Toradora is in order, but you know, let's not get ahead of ourselves. I am more than aware that it has its shortcomings, but I still love it for what it is regardless. I would give this between a low and decent 8 score.
I feel like the first season of Clannad, and by extension the Clannad story as a whole, is pretty much par for the course for what I expect from a key story. Atmospheric, relaxing, and charming slice of life that also has a twist of emotion and powerful messages. I really enjoyed it and its tone, the themes it tackles, and the characters it presented. It's a good story and one that I really enjoy just based on what it is, even if it isn't quite the epitome of what it could be yet. Tomoya is easily one of my favorite key characters, and while we don't really see his best moments yet, what we get here is essential building that leads into some amazing scenes in the future. His growth here to open up to people and help others is a good change to his character. Nagisa is a fantastic main heroine, and while she doesn't reach the heights of Misuzu in my opinion, she's a very strong character worth carrying Clannad as a whole. I generally enjoy all the other heroines and cast of Clannad, but Kotomi is the one that really stands out to me and is ultimately my favorite heroine of the bunch. Even now, Fuko's route was a good introduction, and as I've already said, Kotomi's route is a favorite of mine even after I've consumed the entire franchise. I will say that I definitely agree and advocate the anime as the first experience though. The visual novel can be enjoyed by some, but for a majority of people, it is just a very large time investment for payoffs that a lot of people may or may not find worth the wait. While you do get a lot of extra character interactions, insight, and depth, what does that mean when you're not enjoying the ride to begin with due to the slower pacing? It's because of this reason I highly recommend watching the anime first in order to gain an appreciation and attachment to the world of Clannad, as with its succinct 24 episode runtime, it manages to do just that in just a fraction of the time the visual novel takes. I don't think I particularly hold Clannad's first season / base game above the rest of Key per se. It's pretty much what you'd expect from the franchise as a whole. But with that being said, I still think the baseline is pretty much 8 out of 10 quality if you ignore the true route. So yeah, like Leeson, I gave this anime an 8 out of 10 and still stick with that today. After story be damned. As for the visual novel, let's wait until we complete the full thing until I share and explain my rating.
And now, we will bid you adieu, simply because After Story section is next, and you guys on Twitter came to the executive decision that we should finish this retrospective off next week, December 31st. The finale you've been waiting for is coming. See you in a week.